My name's Daniel Kramer, and for the past 6 months I've been working nights as a janitor at the Harrowick Research Facility, a concrete fortress tucked away in the northern woods of Pennsylvania. Most people don't even know it exists. If you drive past on the county highway, you'd miss the turnoff completely unless you knew where to look. Just a gated service road, half hidden behind a wall of pines, guarded 24 hours a day. Officially, Harrowick is listed as a materials testing facility, contracted under some vague government branch I'd never heard of. But from the first time I set foot inside, I knew that was a front. The place is too big, too heavily secured to order, or too sterile for just testing alloys and polymers. Long, featureless hallways stretch out like arteries in a body, connecting dozens of sealed wings. Every corridor hums with fluorescent lights that never shut off. Every door requires a badge. And every night, as I mop floors and empty trash cans, I feel like I'm walking through a body that's alive, watching me with eyes I can't see. The thing is, as a janitor, I don't get clearance to much of anything. Most of the labs are locked down tight. My badge only works for the main halls, break rooms, and maintenance closets. That's it. But I still hear things. Conversations between white-coated scientists that fall quiet the moment I walk in. The heavy clunk of reinforced doors closing behind people who look too nervous for what they're supposedly studying. And then there are the sounds, low distant vibrations that echo through the vents, sometimes like machinery, other times not so much. At first I tried not to think about it. I kept my head down, did my job, and cashed my checks. That's what you do at Harrowick if you want to keep working. You don't ask questions. You don't look where you shouldn't. But then I found the door. It was around 2 a.m. during one of my slower shifts. I'd been assigned to clean the sub-level corridors, places no one ever seemed to go unless they had high clearance. That was when I noticed it. A heavy steel door at the far end of a side hall, marked with stenciled letters in bold red paint. Authorized Personnel Only. The words were slightly worn, as though countless hands had brushed against them. And unlike every other door on that level, this one didn't have a standard key card reader. Instead, it had a square panel with a scanner, something military grade. Normally, I would have walked right past. But something about that door, it radiated wrongness. The air was cooler there, carrying a faint metallic tang, almost like blood. And then, as I stood there, mop in hand, I heard it. A sound from the other side. At first it was faint, just a scraping, like nails on steel. Then it grew into a slow, wet, dragging noise, something shifting, something breathing. I froze. My mop water sloshed quietly in the bucket. The sound stopped, as if whatever was inside had sensed me. That was the beginning. Over the next few nights, I found myself drawn back to that door. I'd tell myself I was just passing through, doing my job. But every time, I'd stop, listen. And the sounds always came, sometimes scratching, sometimes thuds, dull and heavy, as if fists or heads were slamming against metal. One night, I swear I heard whispering. Not words I could understand, but a wet, gurgling susurrus that clawed at the edges of my sanity. I started asking questions carefully. One of the guards, an older guy named Reynolds, told me flat out, "Don't linger around sub-level D. That's where they keep the stuff you don't want to see." When I asked what he meant, he just looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "Trust me. You're better off not knowing." But I couldn't leave it alone. It happened on a stormy Tuesday night. The facility was nearly empty. Half the staff gone home. The others locked in labs I had no access to. The halls echoed with my footsteps. When I reached the door, I noticed something different. The scanner light, usually solid red, was blinking faintly, and the lock wasn't sealed. The bolts were slightly retracted, as if someone had forgotten to close it properly. My heart pounded. My hands shook, and every rational part of me screamed to turn away. But I didn't. I pushed the handle. The door opened. What hit me first was the stench. Rotten iron thick enough to choke on. The air inside was humid, almost alive. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow service corridor that sloped downward, deeper than the other sub-levels I'd ever seen. The walls were concrete, but they looked old, older than the rest of the facility, as though this section had been built on top of something else. And then I heard it. Movement. Wet, shuffling. Too large to be a rat. I stepped forward, one shaky step at a time. The deeper I went, the stranger the corridor became. Pipes lined the walls, sweating condensation. The floor was streaked with something dark, like dried fluids dragged in long trails. My light flickered over gouges in the concrete, claw marks that went deep. The noises grew louder, breathing, clicking, a low vibration that resonated in my bones. That was when I saw the holding cells. Rows of reinforced glass chambers stretched down the hall. Most were empty, but not all. Behind one pane of scratched glass, a shape hunched in the shadows. My light caught on pale skin stretched too tight over bone, muscles twitching beneath like worms under earth. Its head turned slowly toward me, and God help me, it smiled. Another chamber rattled violently as something massive hurled itself against the glass, something with limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way, its mouth full of teeth that looked like broken porcelain. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, tracking me. My stomach turned to ice. These weren't just animals. They weren't experiments in the traditional sense. They felt wrong, like predators that had been brought here, not created. As if the facility had dug too deep and pulled something from a place humanity wasn't meant to touch. And that's when the alarms went off. The red lights strobed, just sirens wailed. Somewhere above, steel shutters slammed closed. I realized then that I wasn't supposed to be here, not because of classified research, but because containment was fragile. The creatures stirred, awakened by the noise. Some clawed at their glass, others just watched me, grinning with mouths too wide. And then one of the glass panes cracked. The sound was sharp, brittle. A web of fractures spread across the surface. The thing inside threw itself forward again, and this time the glass gave way. I ran. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly behind me, as inhuman shrieks tore through the air. I could hear them spilling out of their cages, claws scraping, teeth snapping. One of them was close. I could feel the rush of hot, foul breath at my back as I sprinted up the sloping hall. I reached the steel door, heart hammering so hard it hurt. I shoved it closed, just as something slammed against the other side. Bolts locked into place automatically, the scanner flashing red. The pounding continued, echoing down the hall. Then, silence. When security found me, I was slumped against the wall, drenched in sweat. They didn't even ask what happened. They just dragged me upstairs, sat me in a stark white room, and left me there until morning. No explanations, no warnings, just silence. When I was finally released, Reynolds met me at the gate. His face was pale, grim. "Now you know," he said, "and you'll wish you didn't. That was 2 weeks ago. I still work here. I don't know why. I guess part of me wants to believe that paycheck is worth the risk, that maybe if I keep my head down, I'll survive. But every night when I pass sub-level D, I hear them behind that door, scraping, whispering, waiting. And I know one night the lock won't hold. When that happens, Harrowick won't just be a secret facility in the woods. It'll be the place where something ancient and hungry walked free. And I'll be the fool who opened the door, marked Authorized Personnel Only,